Well, I feel like in most of the episodes we do, you have done like 90% of the preparation,
But
and like,
that's this one too.
yeah, yeah, that's
Um,
that's our standard.
Cena,
You do all the prep
welcome.
and the framing, and then you also, I'm recording all this. But
Yes,
you
no,
also
it's good.
like you keep me focused.
Yeah, yeah,
You
on
have
track.
you have good professor energy with me. I feel like
Yeah,
I
but
gotta get this kid who talks too much
you're
in
dressed
class.
like much less of a slob than I am, which is good.
I know I made myself fancy.
You may not be a professor, but you are professional, right? You're profesh, like you're wearing a waistcoat. Do you guys call that a waistcoat? In
No,
Afghans call that a waistcoat. And then I
no.
realized, like, oh, I know this fancy Persian word, waistcoat, and then I realized it's just waistcoat. It's a waistcoat.
Oh wow. No, I'm embarrassed to say I've only called this a vest my whole life.
Oh, so you don't even know the Persian word.
I don't even know the Persian word. I can look it up.
So
Persian.
listen, Sina, I wanted I wanted to talk to you because we need to talk about mapping. We have to. Um, and there's this terrifying thing that these people did, which is make a map.
Ah. Yeah, this week in Zionist hysterics, just losing their mind over a
so
website like some
so
HTML code.
the actual HTML code just about. Okay, so let me see if I can show you let me show you a Chrome tab. Okay. Let's look at the mapping project, okay? So here we have it. And really, like you said, it's it's HTML code. There's a frame, but then I don't even like the interactive map. Honestly, I think I'm a mapping person. This is actually like my day job is making these kinds of well, teaching people how to make these kinds of maps. And for me, I'm just like the killer app here is not actually um this map. The killer app right here is this incredible use of this thing called HTML. Look at all
The
these.
90s are back.
They made links, you guys, links.
Yeah,
So here
we're
you
doing
have
hyperlinks.
here you have these incredible hyperlinks between okay, what let's see. Police, there's 271 police institutions or whatever that are mapped. And then everything else is just, the next biggest one is universities, NGOs, weapons and robotics, and then everything else is fairly small. The NGOs, I suppose, are some of them are just out and out pro-Israel organizations, and I think you tweeted someone who kind of looked through it and found that some of these are Jewish organizations that spend most of their time and resources supporting Israel. So um so for doing this, and all these links are these hyperlinks between these organizations, corporations, police establishments, and then how they work with Israel, how they support Israel. Or in some cases, it's not even about Israel. In some cases, it's just like displacing poor people from Boston, like getting people displacing, throwing people out of their houses so they can redevelop the neighborhood or whatever.
Well, that's one of the really interesting things about how they've designed this project is that they're looking at sort of settler colonial relationships in different parts of the world and kind of connecting the logic of it. And I think this is a development of the last sort of 20, 15, 20 years, is that you've gone from Palestinian solidarity activism, uh, and sorry, I had to let my dog in. He was scratching at the door. You've gone from like Palestine solidarity activism, which of course, like you know intimately, from your days in ISM, to a kind of translating that knowledge into a global story of settler colonial violence. And in the case of Palestine, that it's an ongoing settler colonial project, like the country we live in, like the US, like a lot of different countries, is that this is a process taking over people's land, taking over a foreign, like indigenous people's lands, and like displacing them and impoverishing them. Like this is like a machine that has different, that has different scenarios that are unfolding simultaneously. So that's one thing that's really, I mean, whatever your feelings on like the map and like the website, like it's a very like humble website, but like the logic is very sound, and it's a very, and I think that's one of the reasons why they reacted so hysterically. I mean, they would have reacted to like, a lot
Let's
of
get to
things.
the reaction in a bit. I just want to show like the extensive research here. So cuz I just clicked through to I use this HTML technology to click through the Boston I clicked through to the Boston Police Department. So we have this incredibly they have this cute little thing of these are the harms. These are the harms that the institution contributes to. These are the other subordinate entities, and then you can view it on the map. And then it's an article. Each one of these links has an extensively researched and referenced article. There are links in here as well. But then, and then you go to the bottom and there's usually some kind of link to Israel. So here it talks about how the New England chapter of the ADL sponsors annual all expenses paid delegations to Israel for high-ranking New England police, ICE, FBI, and other security officials, where these officials meet with Israeli military police and intelligence agencies, and so on. So there's these training trips, these junkets that Israel offers, or whatever that the U.S. offers to Israel. So there's always this kind of exchange with all the police departments, and that was, I think, one of the places where the research often starts, is like looking at these trips, right? Like why why does everybody go to Israel? What does a Canadian or a US police department have to learn from Israel, where they're like fencing in individual communities, not allowing people to go between them without passing through extensive checkpoints, where they have different license plates for different ethnicities. Like, what does this have to do with the daily problems of policing in a city in North America, right? Well, it turns out quite a lot. But just to give you a sense of like what we're talking about here, in terms of what this mapping project is actually mapping. And then universities, there's also amazing connections. Obviously Harvard, we can go and look at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, one of my favorites, which is complicit in more harm in terms of the numbers of harms. There's more harms here than there was from the police. But and they talk about the land grabs, and then the extensive, 4 or 5 paragraphs on the extensive um, support for Israel, support Saudi Arabia, propaganda for corporations, and so on. So
I mean, I think the story here is that at like a kind of over like a bird's eye view of how to understand this is that like the East is a career for a lot of people. Like
yes,
Palestine, Zionism,
absolutely.
Zionism is a career. Like
Yeah.
it's not. It keeps people employed. Like these projects are not just in name only. They
Yeah.
have institutional. They
Yeah.
have financial backers. They're not just like woven on a thin air. It's not. You
Yeah.
can't attain. You can't like, if you want to put it this way, like achieve what the Zionists have
Yeah.
without a kind of
Yeah.
very large, very active, um, let's put it as like a, like kind of security state like footprint
Yeah.
in the country that is its biggest sponsor, which is the US, right? Like everybody understands, like it's not a controversial thing to say that the US, like Israel is not just like an ally of the US. It's not like
Right.
it's a proxy of the US. It's a colonial. I think that it's a very I think that the relationship between Zionism and its like imperial sponsors is very interesting and very
Mm-hmm.
complicated and can't really be compared to a lot of different other
Yeah.
projects.
Yeah.
I guess you can also say that about South Africa too, but the is that they are unique in how they develop
Yeah.
to their own logic. And so when people say like, "Oh, Israel controls Congress," it's like, no, it's not a
No.
control of Congress. You're
They
presuming
don't
that these
have
are two
to.
separate things. Yeah, like
Yeah.
these are overlapping
Yeah.
institutions, and that yeah, sure, they have these individuals who like go through these revolving doors between private lobbies and like public service, whatever. But
Yeah.
like that's just the East is a career. It's a way of making yourself like that's like the and there's like different sections of it. There's
Yeah.
like the nativist section. There's like in the at least in the Iranian case with like you would have you would have these big like in terms of like psychological warfare, in terms of information warfare, Orientalism, which is basically sort of like a subset of it. I think that like this is that like the
Absolutely.
info warfare we see on the Palestine question, on enemy states, Venezuela, whatever, is that you have the cynical deployment of like so-called native compradors
Yeah.
who then verify our terrible presumptions about a place, like, and bear witness to. And that's like a more recent development. Before that, it was just people like Bernard Lewis croaking their way, making racist statements, and
Well,
like these
yeah.
things evolve, right?
And what I
But like,
love, what I love about the mapping project is that it's like people like you and me, we are naturally inclined to look for these university connections. The next most obvious thing is like the police. But like the police is like 271 articles on the different police departments. But then there's real estate, right? Of course real estate is going to be involved. We're talking about throwing people off their land fundamentally. That's what this whole thing is about. Obviously,
Zionism is a real estate project. It's
obviously
about
real
real
estate
estate. Like, it's not,
corporations are
yeah.
going to be, yeah, going to be implicated, right? And then they get into the softer, these NGOs that are like ostensibly about something good, but then it turns out, they don't have the same, if you're an institution that's about children, it's like, yeah, you're about children, you're not about Palestinian children. Or you're about like gay rights, but you're not about Palestinian gay rights. Like there's always like these rights and freedoms that are, Palestinians are completely erased from. So they do this thing. Okay, we're on June 3rd. Comes out on BDS Boston's Twitter. It comes out on Mondo Weiss. Okay, so Mondo Weiss does an interview with them. And then boom, away we go. So we have on Twitter, we have some smaller accounts, basically saying that it's like an anti-Jewish conspiracy. One of them says, seriously, could you find a difference between a right-wing poster that shows Jews control the world and a left-wing graphic that shows the ADL controls the world? Okay. These are kind of low effort.
Yeah, typical, just
we
typical
start with
cheap. Yeah.
low effort, low follower count kind of accounts.
Are you still sharing your screen?
No, no, no. Yeah, I guess I could show you. I kind of don't want to, in the sense of like I
That's
don't want
fine.
to direct people to these. But there's another
I mean,
one where
yeah, it's typical. Yeah, it's not exactly. It's just like a project like this. I
yeah.
think is really interesting. I think that
What
it
happened?
has a way of working that it's like so. It just shows that it's so clear
Yeah.
that these like institutional connections, say between NGOs, university, the security state, weapons manufacturers, that there is like a nexus of organizations that participate in U.S. empire, and Israel is a critical site of U.S. empire. It's not, it's not the only one. I mean, but it's one of them, and
So
it's one of the sort of critical theaters of that imperial pursuit. And so, yeah, it makes sense that high level cops get to fly and enjoy like a
yeah,
nice week in Israel, and God knows what else they get to enjoy.
yeah, yeah,
Just speculating.
yeah.
But like this is like any other corporate enterprise. Like this is what they do. This is the benefit of being part of that class, and
So
that's one of the reasons why you support
yeah.
efforts to bully and repress and criminalize BDS, for instance,
So
because yeah, it's your job to. It's what pays your bills.
So we have the anti-Semitic BDS movement in Boston is now mapping out and targeting synagogues, Jewish schools, and Jewish organizations in America. BDS was never about Palestine. It was always about Jew hatred. Like, that is just ridiculous. Synagogues, Jewish schools, and Jewish organizations. 271 police institutions, 30 some universities. How are the,
But
what
even
is,
but
how are
even if
the,
they did, even
yeah,
if they did, like they added to this map, like this is a project. Like when you
yeah,
support colonization of
yeah,
Palestine,
yeah.
that's what you do. And
That's
so if
right.
you're
That's
making
right.
a map of organizations and projects and groups
You
that
right.
actively support the colonization of Palestine, like you're going to put them on this map.
And some of them, some of them might be even their religious interests may be evangelical, or they may be Jewish or whatever, and then you can't
Yeah.
like, yeah, the chips are gonna fall where they may if you're mapping these connections, which apparently, which evidently they did. So that's where we start, but then we start getting official, mainstream media. We have the Jerusalem Post, I guess. BDS map ties police media to Boston Jewish quote unquote Zionist institutions, which is like, yeah, the Jerusalem Post doesn't know what a Zionist is. They have to put
Yeah.
it in. They have to put it in scare quotes. What are Zionists? We have no idea what
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah, that's a new thing I've noticed the last few years is people saying that to even use the word Zionism
Right,
is
right.
somehow a slur, like it's some kind of like to be against because it's a neutral thing. Like I've seen this before is that to be anti-Zionist is to be racist because you're not because Zionism is simply
The right of,
Jewish
yeah,
nationalism
the right
and
of,
Jewish self-determination,
yes, Jewish
and that's the way they
self-determination
frame
in
it.
Palestine.
Yeah.
uh,
And so, like, the convenient aspect of it being a settler colonial
yeah,
project gets erased,
yeah,
and it just elided into this like, oh, the world has many ethnicities, and Jew is one of them,
right.
and and Zionism is a wing of Jewishness, which is like
And
a
the,
very cynical, like
lots
very
of little
untrue,
tricks.
just straight up
So
fictional
they had
connection.
Zionist and scare quotes in the headline, but they figured out what a Zionist is here already. Boston Jewish and Zionist institutions were allegedly to be structurally tied. Allegedly to be structurally tied. I mean, it's not they're not alleged. Oh, and then harms is in scare quotes because apparently throwing somebody out of their house is a scare quote. Maybe it's a harm and maybe it's not a harm. Um, so yeah, Jerusalem Post gets in on it, and then from there, it starts getting lots of well, I guess you could say hate directed towards it. On June 7th, the Anti-Defamation League gets in on it, and the ADL um yeah, so there's a lot of beautiful work conflating, and just doing this is against Jews, conflation. So here's the ADL New England. The BDS Boston's call for the dismantling of Boston's Jewish community. Is that what they were calling for? So apparently calling for dismantling these oppressive institutions that support settler colonialism in Palestine, and police and real estate organizations that are throwing people out of their homes in Boston is the dismantling of Boston's Jewish community. See how that happened?
Yeah, this is from the Department of They Will Say Anything Anytime.
Yeah.
Like it's like Zionists will they'll just say anything, and it's
Anything.
like it's
Anything.
always held behind the shield of, oh, this attack on us is racist,
Yeah.
and the fact that this project of Zionism is inherently racist, and like
Yeah.
openly so, in the sense that it promulgates a view, and they did this. They have this like national state identity law, whatever it was called, that Bibi put through, I think 2018 or something. Like they codified the fact that it's a racially segregated or like an apartheid state. It's separated from people of a certain race are situated differently from other people in relation to how their state in the relation to the state. So like
Yeah.
the whole logic of Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, blah blah blah, right? Like you
Yeah.
can't have it both ways. You can't be an openly like chauvinist, like racist movement that says we as a certain people with a
Yeah.
certain kind of background get
Yeah.
inherent access to certain resources and land and laws, and then other people, and you can't then hide behind the claim of, oh, you can't call us racist because
Right.
that itself is racism. Like this
Yeah.
is like this is the most obvious kind of like anybody could see this, and yet because of the fact that like anti-Palestinian racism is so normalized that that Zionism has had such an important sort of foothold culturally. Like there's like multiple shows, Israeli shows on in our television, like the terrible Tehran show that's on Apple TV. Like before that, it was like Valley of Tears or whatever. Like they make like these movies that are like obviously like Israeli nationalist movies, like the Entebbe movie that they made,
Oh,
like
yeah.
Munich. Like this is a
Mhm.
cultural sort of like ideological, like a culture war that's been running for a long time of saying that, oh, Israel is not a sort of racist imperialist, like apartheid state, which it's always been, which is open about that. It's actually this kind of like situation where these plucky Jews are fighting against, are
Yeah.
just trying to like survive against these bloodthirsty Arabs. And the way they've been able to sell that over the course of like the 7-decade history of Israel is quite a feat. And it's like, there's like movies that go back decades. Like there was one, I was just looking at another one with like Kirk, who was the guy from Spartacus? The guy, I forget now.
Kirk Douglas.
Kirk Douglas plays some Zionist hero or something. Like that's just one example, and that's from like 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Like this is that the Zionists have been given permission to narrate, to use Ever Said's term, and the Palestinians have simply been denied that. Like their humanity has been denied. That's just the simple logic of this, and yet because of the internet and because of the tools of the internet, I mean, this is an HTML thing, just simply like bearing witness to that sort of like influence project of institutions, of police institutions, Zionist, Jewish, non-Jewish, Christian. I mean, most Christians and most Zionists in the U.S. aren't Jewish; they're Christian.
That has to be the starting point. Most of the Zionists in the world are not Jewish, and some large plurality of Jews in the world are not Zionist. So this is a connection they want you to make as 100% connection, right? Jews and Zionists are the same thing, but in fact, there's most of the power, demographic and otherwise, to the Zionist project actually comes from outside the Jewish community. It comes from imperialism, and a lot of the Jewish community also doesn't have that kind of investment in Zionism, like globally speaking. Anyway, politicians start getting in on the action within 3 or 4 days after the ADL throws down. We have Congressman Richie Torres. The BDS movement put together a mapping project, scare quotes, that accuses Jewish and Zionist institutions. So I guess Richie Torres, also congressman, can't figure out what Zionism is. He puts that in scare quotes, of various evils in American society. Various evils in American society. He didn't even want to use harms. He just threw the word evil in there, right? Scapegoating is a common symptom of anti-Semitism, which is at its core a conspiracy theory. Well, we're in agreement on that. It just has nothing to do with what's going on here.
And this is the farcical nature of like the American political scene, where you have these obvious lobby groups that have just an assortment of clowns at various levels of government, just on call to like have tweets condemning the latest thing. And it's just like, this is how influence works. This is how like and there's different kinds of influence in the US. There's different kinds of foreign policy. Like there's I would say, and just as insidious and just as active lobby for the Gulf states, and they're different too. There's a Saudi lobby, there's a Qatari lobby,
there's a Ukraine lobby,
there's a Ukraine lobby. I mean, this is just the nature of American political life, is that you pay some money and you create these you create these conduits where you can support and prop up and have allies in the various political scenes. And there's nothing abnormal about that. It's just normal. It's just exposing that is so enraging to a certain class of people, to a certain like the idea that you could simply even talking about it. I mean, this is the crazy thing. Palestinians are told, don't be violent, like do nonviolent protests, like don't and then they do that. They do BDS, right? Which and then is criminalized.
They make a map. Right? They make a map.
Let's talk about the Holy Land Foundation. The Holy Land Foundation, they threw those guys into lifelong prison sentences because, God forbid, they built a charity that had a really effective reach in Palestine, that was strengthening the people, that became a conduit for diaspora Palestinians and Arabs and whoever the supporters were, to then help rebuild Palestinian institutions inside Palestine. So like that was just one example of many, that the criminalization of Palestinian solidarity continues, and the way that this project kind of unfolded anonymously. And it's a simple sort of like, oh yeah, let's just shine a light. Like these are classic liberal values.
Yeah, exactly. A voice, it's shining a light in the darkness, voice in the wilderness. But I just wanted to show this is a Ukraine flag in the bio. I'm actually optimistic and perhaps naive about reforming the anti-Semitism out of BDS Boston. If leftist Jews on the ground talk to them about why what could have been a useful map is anti-Semitic, maybe they'll listen. And it's interesting because this was like quote tweeting somebody, Ilana underscore who underscore, which was a great thread that I read early on about the way Ilana grew up, and how she grew up in a way where she was given to understand as a young person that being Jewish meant support for Israel, and no less and no more. And she, kind of coming out of that, and obviously her account no longer exists. I have no idea whether it came because of uh, you know because of backlash to her thread, but her thread did get pretty big in defense of the mapping project. So I could well imagine that she was hounded off Twitter, at least for a while, for her
Yeah.
troubles.
I mean, the background of all this too is the fact that Zionists have been doing the exact same thing of targeting and using
Yeah.
the internet and collecting information and
Yeah.
posting
And
people's
they're really
information.
doing it. Yeah, they
And that's the
really
thing that they're doing.
do.
So it's classic Zionist like imperialist projection
Exactly.
of like, oh, the thing that I do to you, God forbid you do it to me.
Yeah,
Like,
and
this
they're
is
not, but it's a
yeah,
different
like,
thing. But it's of course the way their mentality is. You're always doing, something. You're always targeting somebody for violence as an imperialist. So that must be what they're doing to us. I just wanted to show Senator Warren has stepped in on
God,
June 10th to denounce
pathetic
at this moment of
Just
rising
looking at all the
anti-Semitism,
losers
racist attacks
supporting
and
him.
political violence. This mapping of the Jewish community is dangerous and irresponsible. We strongly condemn anti-Semitism. Da, 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 da. What's cool about it though is that Warren did make it into the mapping project. Hey, there is an entry on Elizabeth Warren.
She did.
Let me pull that up. We've got let me see. Share. So right back at you, Senator Warren. Because politician, there's three of them, obviously, Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, Ed Markey, Elizabeth Warren. This was a joint statement from Markey and Warren, but let's see what Warren does. Massachusetts Senator, another extensive article, lots of links you can follow. Extensive supports ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from their homeland while advocating for the interests of U.S. weapons developers in Congress. So I guess
this is their job. Like, this is Elizabeth Warren's job. But the fact that they lose their minds when they're just even named, is that it means that that there is to be psychological here, it's like they must have some degree of shame for this, for them to react. So for the people who are being shown to be part of this, as that someone like Elizabeth Warren, I imagine, I probably shouldn't think about it even. This is like one for AIDS, just writing something, so maybe not. But there's a part of me that likes to think that you know what the situation is. You know, you know who shoots the knees of of protesters, like the things that we accuse Iran of, Israel does out in the open, right? Like this is the insane position you have to be in to even talk about this stuff, because the thing that one country does happily, proudly every day, right, is that then used to as a cudgel against other countries, and said that, oh, you're against human rights. And this is just the typical, and Israel's always okay, how are they on Palestine? Are they, do they show their principles? Do they show that do they have solidarity? I mean, the other story here is the atrocious reaction of the BDS Central Committee, or whatever it's called.
We'll get to that. Yeah,
we should probably get to that, because
But I did want to say technically, so by June 16th, the mapliberation.org had been basically bullied off of two of their servers. So one of their servers and then their backup server. By let me just show you the FBI, who are also in the web. I mean, it's pretty cool to see it's like a real-time demonstration of how the connections actually work. To have the organizations that are described then show that they're going after the mapping project. Boston area Jewish groups condemn anti-Semitic attack. FBI is tracking the website. The FBI is tracking mapliberation.org. this
I mean, yeah,
HTML
it's
website.
so bonkers to just say like you really have nothing better to do with
Yeah.
yourselves
Yeah, and
than
I
to look at a website. Like maybe they'll learn something by reading the website.
yeah, well, I don't think, yeah, I don't know if they can track it without reading it, but I mean, I hope some of them are getting some level of education from it. So they're bullied off several servers. The ADL bragged about it. They tried to make a hashtag scrap the map. Scrap
Someone
the
got
map.
paid money to do that. Someone gets paid like
Yeah. Yeah.
$100,000 a year more to
Um,
like come up with these like pathetic scams. Like, or, like I want to know. Like, I want to ask this like honestly to like a scientist. Oh, ooh, I disconnected. My computer disconnected from my headphones. And my ooh, that worked now. Like I want to. I wish I could have like a sort of ardent Zionist on the show to ask like why is it so enraging for you to even like to have like an antagonist for you exist? Like doesn't the antagonism give you like a reason of being? Like doesn't the like existence of a Palestinian and a Palestinian solidarity movement like provide you, I'm talking to like the person at the ADL who comes up with these corny like like with these corny like projects, like wouldn't you rather that like you just do your own thing and like push for your country's agenda as opposed to just hunting down the internet, as this person Zionist would rather try to delete the internet than to stop assassinating children and burning trees? That
That's
like
very good.
that this it's like this is like, can't you just stand on your own and like accept the fact that there's people who like antagonists? And of course the answer is no, because like the point of like the organization of ADL is to bully people. It's to exist to exist to bully people in case that they get too out of line and challenge like conventional sort of political positions. And it's not so much for people like us who are freaks who like don't matter, but it's to send a message to like the normies, to like the liberals. And I think typically a project like this is aimed at liberals because generally
Yeah.
conservatives in the
Yeah.
US don't give a shit about Palestine. If then, they probably support Israel big time because there's a
Yeah.
lot of Christian Zionists,
Yeah.
and they actually like get into big like Mike Pompeo, the former head of the CIA, former Secretary of State. Like he was a huge Christian Zionist. Like Mike Pence, same thing. So like the fact that they're so insecure about the existence of their antagonists is just, I don't know, it's, for me it's such a psychological tell, but it's also just a sign of like how much resources they have to fight these things, because a part of their resources is dedicated to locating, naming, and tracking their
Yeah.
antagonists and
And
people
their
who challenge them.
fundraising
So
is based on that. So I just wanted to show, this is the week that they overturned abortion rights, Miranda rights, and what else? They introduced concealed carry in all through the Supreme Court. But the House lawmakers what are they working on? They're urging a federal inquiry into the mapping project. This is June 22nd.
I mean, yeah. See, this is
So-
also like this is also, I think too, there is a kind of funny thing about this too, which is these politicians do this stuff to show like they show their gratitude, and like this is their job. Their job is to stand up and like and to automatically just like condemn, because
29
that's the nature of like American political action, is that there's like these levers that these politicians represent, and like with a certain amount of like money and whatever, like you can just get them to do anything. And so like this is one story, this is just like another example of it. And but there's a part of me that's like, are all these guys just like standing up instantly and doing these ridiculous like overreaction to like some HTML links? Is this a sign of like, okay, you're getting your money's worth, whoever's like supporting this? Is this to show client patron?
I think so. I think it has to be partly that. I mean, it can't be entirely that, but I do think it's a little bit of justifying all these organizations, justifying their existence. There's no big targets to fight, right? You're talking about a population that's not got a state to defend them, and so they're just hunting down every little group of Jewish peace activists in a little city or whoever these people whoever's behind the mapping project is probably some mix of students, Jewish and Arab
And it's
students,
and a lot of the consequences are
Harvard
very serious too. Like like they ruin people's lives. They like go after undergrads, like people who are just like in college. Like if Canary Project was around when I was in college, they would have bullied me into silence. I would have been
Absolutely.
it totally would have worked on me.
Yeah.
It just was, I was a little early for that stuff. It came later. Is that because you're so much of your personal information is available online now through social media, and you can set up bots that like take screenshots of every single tweet with like a certain, like that this is capable kind of like information warfare. And this is like sort of technology that has been developed in like the last 20 years and like honed. And in some ways it's like, I would say that like there's like the famous NSO software, right? Like the Israeli NSO software that like is like bought and sold by governments around the world to like, hack people's phones.
I just wanted to say this thing. We fear this map may be used as a roadmap for violent attacks by supporters of the BDS movement and against the people and entities listed therein. So that's going to be interesting. The day that a group of BDS movement activists attacks a police station. An FBI, are they going to storm a prison or something? I mean, so, but it's also like this, this projection again, right? It's like we fear this map may at some point be used as violence. Like these people are defending like mass murder of children. Like, last year they killed 65 children. None of these institutions batted an eye. None of these Congress people gave a damn. And they're like, we fear though that this map of locations of these, incredibly well defended imperialist institutions could, in some future, timeline, be used as a map to do violent attacks. Maybe even of the sort that we do against Palestinians every day, which would be, unfathomable and horrible. So now I think we're ready to talk about the perhaps somewhat disappointing establishment reaction.
Somewhat.
I'm not. Let's try to do it in a way that heals division. Let's be healing about this.
No,
healing?
Wrong.
We're not gonna heal.
I wish we had a soundboard. Does this have a soundboard?
No, I don't think we have a soundboard. But let me again direct you to someone who's very insightful on this. There were some non-endorsement endorsements that came out, right? So they're sort of like, we don't support or oppose what's it called? Yeah, so the BDS movement said it has no connection to and does not endorse the mapping project in Boston. Simultaneously, though, we reject and condemn the cynical use of this project as a pretext for repressive attacks. So it's sort of like, but if you why do you have to go to such lengths to distance yourself from them then? And Dr. Honey Badger, who as we all know about the Honey Badger, what the Honey Badger, how the Honey Badger feels about stuff, says, "Oh, I noticed you didn't say J Street. You said APAC. Looks like BDS is in the pocket of is so on officially compromised and so forth." So there's this kind of accusation that this non-endorsement was a sign of compromise. I think that was. Were there any other kinds of
No, their statement.
Yeah.
The statement they made was atrocious.
Yeah, it was
It's embarrassing.
It was trying to distance yourself. So there were a lot of groups that did that did.
Did you show the tweet? No, you didn't show the tweet.
I did.
Well, but show the actual tweet that BDS
did. Okay, but I only have it.
Honey Badger.
I have it on Honey Badger's.
Okay,
have
whatever.
it on
That's
Honey
fine.
Badgers.
Okay, whatever. People understand.
But it's okay. It's okay. I can show you.
Shameful
I can show
liberals.
you again. I can show you again. It's okay because I want to show you.
So hard about a website. Why is it so impossible to simply stand up for your principles and say, yeah, like we're
here.
We know, like we are the victims of Zionism, and shining a light on its institutional ties to people, to organizations that victimize other people, non-Palestinians. Like that is a great thing because it forges a link in people's minds. It's like, oh, okay, like there is something what unites like this,
but
here in Canada,
it's also like
the oil pipeline search with Palestinian liberation.
Exactly.
Like that's I think what scares them.
No, but here,
most.
look. They even say endorsement of this project by any group affiliated with the BDS movement conflicts with this affiliation. So it's sort of legalese in a way. It's like hard to parse what this means, but I guess they're saying, you know, it's not even if a BDS group says they endorse mapping, it doesn't mean they're not doing it in the name of it's a not in our name thing, right? It's a not in our name kind of statement.
Maybe you should read it for the people who will be listening to this.
Yeah. So the Palestinian BDS National Committee, the broadest coalition leading the global BDS movement for Palestinian rights, has no connection to and does not endorse the mapping project in Boston, Massachusetts. Endorsement of this project by any group affiliated with the BDS movement conflicts with this affiliation. Again, very hard to parse that sentence. Simultaneously, though, we reject and condemn the cynical use of this project as a pretext for repressive attacks on the Palestine Solidarity Movement by anti-Palestinian racists and apologists for Israeli apartheid, which is super interesting because, saying it was Israeli apartheid or talking about anti-Palestinian racism used to be the thing that gets you into trouble. And now it's like, that's okay, but mapping these connections is what is now a bridge too far, right? Which is
it's also interesting, the idea that that these synagogues, if these Jewish institutions, groups, as if they're not, their support for Israel is secret. It's not. They're open for their support for secret. So what's wrong with saying that? Oh, here are the people who are openly support of this of this racist colonial project. Like there would be nothing. Like there are maps about oil companies, right? Like who support environments. Like this is typical liberal enlightenment kind of values of shining a light on something and bringing knowledge to it and consciousness raising, whatever you want to call it. This is awareness. Nothing, even it looks like it's something out of the 90s, right? Like this is something that would be on
aesthetically,
what was the server? Like a rise up group. Like this is exactly that kind of vibe. So actually,
BDS
I lost you for a second. My stupid headphones.
Oh, that's okay. I think we're still going.
Let me
as
pause
if
for a second.
Nothing was wrong.
Consarn it.
We're still recording, so I just wanted while you're not. That's okay. I'll just keep talking nonetheless, Sina, until you come back. But for example, there's a BDS Genobia. The mapping project is an indispensable tool. But what I like about this is so there's the maps that come out, there's the backlash, and then there's now I think we're in the phase of the backlash against the backlash, which is nice. So here we have BDS Genobia, hands off Handala, hashtag liberation, not ingratiation. I like that a lot. At first I thought they were saying integration, and then I was like, oh no, ingratiation. That's actually pretty clever. The what is it, the PFLP, did they, the Palestine Youth Movement endorsed?
PFLP released a statement.
PFLP released a statement connecting the dots. Palestine Chronicle, reject repression. Rima Najjar did a nice article over on Medium, mapping our differences for Palestine's liberation. So I think I guess that takes us to the present. We've gone back and forth, right? But it's for me, the complete freak out over it was a bit surprising to me, and it was like an echo to me of IAW years of Israeli Apartheid Week or the Coalition Against Israeli Apartheid in Toronto, and where the Zionists would absolutely, this was they would deploy everything. Michael Ignatieff would write an op-ed in the Globe and Mail. The Canadian Parliament would issue a formal denunciation of these lectures, these campus lectures about the history of Palestine.
They don't want to have antagonists. They want to have a pure, unchallenged hegemony, which doesn't exist in the world. You can't erase a country and force out hundreds of thousands of people and besiege millions of people in Gaza and then like cordon off and ethnically divide
Yeah.
other millions of people in the so-called West Bank. Like, you can't do all those things and not expect people to resist that. Like, this
Yeah.
is just basic laws of political
Human nature.
gravity.
Yeah.
Like, human, like, why focus so much energy on your antagonist? Just like, you think like they brought more attention to the mapping project
I think so.
than it ever would have
I
received.
think so.
So this is the Alanis Morissette, like, isn't it ironic? Like, I'm gonna put the GIF in here because like this is one of the sort of tools of that. Like,
The first
I remember I started. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, the first couple of weeks, I wanted to like do a series of tweets, especially by like leftists who were like, we don't endorse this. I wanted to do like that "fixed it for you" genre, where I'm like, I think what you meant to say was, hey, cool map. I'm gonna check that out when I have a minute.
Like, if they
that's all
had just
you had to
ignored
say.
it, if they had just ignored it, nothing would have happened. We would have been
Nothing.
like, hey, look at this awesome map.
What do you do with
and
this
like,
map?
and we
What
would
do
have
you-
gone on with our
Yeah,
lives. Like,
what can you do
like,
with
you
it,
know?
really? Honestly, like, what can you do with such a map? I don't even mean to disparage it.
There's a deeper thing. What we're talking about is to not be cynical. I don't mean to be cynical, but I mean that what does knowledge do in our society? Does the
Yeah.
knowledge
Yeah.
of like the reality of like Israeli apartheid change anything on our ground? I mean, you can make an argument that like it's people are kept, or the truth is hidden from them.
Yeah.
That like the violence, the everyday violence, that there is this corporate media silence, which is documented, which is obvious. Like at least where we live, like these aren't like hard things to understand. That like every
Yeah.
media corporation has its biases, its political leanings, and
Yeah.
the Zionists have enjoyed 100%. They bat 100 every time.
Yeah.
Right,
1,000.
like, and so the very fact bat 1,000. Sorry, I forgot baseball.
Aren't you the baseball
God,
guy?
I'm the baseball guy. I said a bat 100. Like they score 100 out of whatever. But like they and so the fact that like there are these small, tiny, little corner pockets of resistance that they have to
Right.
stamp out every
Right.
5 seconds. That they have like something like, even it's the same vibe with like Press TV and
Well,
Telesur.
or like
They have
Assange.
to-
I mean,
they have
Assange.
to-
They're trying to
yeah.
send Assange to America for treason, to put him away for 1,000 years or whatever.
to send a message.
Yeah. And like, and
Which, interestingly enough, Assange's mistake. I know this is Assange's mistake was trusting the enlightened West and thinking that his rights as a journalist would somehow protect him.
No,
and like,
you know
I
what?
think that was
He
he should
didn't,
have
because he
just
knew-
done what Snowden did.
No, he
And-
knew, but by the time, you're right. There was a time when he was in that position, but by the time, like, I think he was instrumental in Snowden getting out to where he ended up. I think if
It's the-
Snowden had
yeah.
listened to anybody other than him, Snowden would be in jail too. But Assange's, what really screwed Assange was actually, I hate to say this, but like going to a place with elections. Like going to a place with multi-party elections. If he had gone to the Cuban or to the Chinese
Or to the Iranian embassy.
or to the Iranian embassy, there's no chance that a regime change, well, not no chance, but like there's a much lower chance. Every few years, the Americans get a crack at any place that has elections, right? They get it. They can take, like, even Lopez Obrador in Mexico, who was like, I'll take, we'd love to take Assange. And it's true. I'm sure they would. But then in 5 years or 4 years or whenever there's an election, the right wing will come to power and they'll give him right back up. And then it'll be a short flight to Mexico. So, yeah.
Sorry, I got us off topic.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But okay. So there are, it comes down for me to a couple of theories, okay, about why this backlash is so devastating. One is like purely hopeless and cynical, which is like there's all these establishments and all these resources just to fight any pro-Palestine sentiment rearing its head anywhere in the world, and they smash it
the
because they
whack-a-mole.
can. Yeah. So they can, and they have to justify it to their funders, and they have to explain why this group should be paid, and look what we did to fight Palestinian, look what we did to fight Palestinians, whatever, anywhere in the world. So that's one. That's probably the worst. If that's true, that's the worst. And two is maybe it does have some effect, that has them genuinely frightened. And so then you have to look at like what is it that really freaks them out in the information space. It's the Assanges, it's the mapping projects. It seems to be like the data, right? Like there's something about like presenting the actual information in the rawest form that drives them more crazy than like the kind of stuff you or I do, where we're just there talking, like we're just commenting, we're just giving our thoughts, you know, we're talking about like what we think.
Like no one comes after us.
No, because and we can, you know, we can say what we can say more or less what we want, but like when they present facts like that, somehow they really do lose it. And you know, so they go after these investigative outfits, the data driven journalists, the people who present like more raw data. So maybe that tells you something. I don't know. Like maybe that is more important, that kind of information space than the commentary space that we're in right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say. It's hard to say. I think I think that for me, I guess the sort of takeaway is the existence that like yeah, like this is your that information, knowledge, whatever you want to call it, like that it is a constant battlefield.
Yeah.
That you have belligerents on the other side who are happy to like take you down and
Yeah.
like find ways to like get you not to speak and to like get to deplatform you, whatever. And I've never been I've tried never to sort of like maybe I'm guilty of this with like literally one person whose name I won't mention, a famous Twitter nemesis of mine, but I try not to do the you should deplatform this person. Like you
Right.
shouldn't. I try not to say you shouldn't speak to this person.
Right.
Like I'm not in the business of policing other people's
Right. We can't anyway.
conversations. Like
I mean,
and it's
maybe we would if
It's
we
like,
could.
it's
I don't know.
presumptuous.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm going to tell people, oh, don't talk to that guy because he's an
Yeah.
asshole and I don't like him. Like,
Yeah.
who the hell am I to
Yeah.
tell what other people what to do?
Yeah.
So like, go and talk to them now. There are consequences with like someone keeps platforming some asshole, some series of assholes. Then I'm going to make a conclusion. They're like, oh, you're in the business of platforming pathetic assholes, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to have anything to do with you.
Right.
But like, that's my decision. But
You
then
can
to sort of, like,
withdraw your association.
exactly. Like I don't have to participate in it. But this obsession with, as particularly Zionists need to stamp out their enemies discursively. They need to humiliate them. They need to silence them. And it's just like this pathetic insecurity, I feel, that says
Yeah.
that you don't want to be reminded of these people these people you
And-
tried to erase, that
and
you
on the
didn't
other
finish the
hand-
job.
On the other hand,
they
they're
stuck
completely-
around.
Yeah, but they're completely obsessed, right? Like colonizers are obsessed with the people they're colonizing. Like white people, racist white people are obsessed with black people. Like there's nothing that they're more
Yeah.
obsessed with, right? So like and Israeli, anti-Palestinian racists are obsessed with Palestinians, absolutely obsessed with them. They'll follow them everywhere. They'll follow them to the ends of the earth. To fulfill that obsession. So, I do think there are these psychological things, but I also think there is there must be, beyond that, there must be some special political value to this type of information. There has to be. It can't be solely psychological. It can't just be like, we have nothing to do this month, so we're going to attack the mapping project. There is more to that.
Should we keep going? Sorry to interrupt, but should we keep going? Because you made a lot of more links.
Yeah, I
Do you not care?
I was trying to open up the indicative ones. Did you have a one you really liked?
The Paul Mason link was pretty hilarious. The map.
Yeah, I mean, like there's a difference in quality, right? This was also the same week that Paul Mason was trying to create these links between Russian disinformation and the left, right? So in the UK's and his map, the map that they put up of his is really funny because he's got like the whole black community is like one box.
Like how pathetic and much of a loser do you have to be to spend your day like making a dorky like MS Paint level map of your enemies?
Yeah.
Like what kind of pathetic, self-obsessed narcissist are you that like this is what your life is, that you couldn't do anything better with your day than this. Like he literally should have been cleaning his toilets instead of making that dumb map, because he wouldn't have been made fun of so much, and he would have had clean toilets. That there's like, this is the hilarious thing about this information economy we live in, where you have these respectable people who have the ability to sort of like put their thumb, so to speak, their discursive thumb on the scale, and use whatever platform they have to kind of denounce and deny and like whitewash and all that shit. And yet, like, what they produce is just comical stupidity that like nobody cares about. Like nobody cares. Nobody cares
Well,
about
this
the
wasn't
stupid map Paul
intended-
Mason made.
This wasn't intended for public consumption, right? This was intended for.
That's true.
Yeah, this was intended.
Which is actually
for his-
worse.
yeah,
I think that's worse.
This is a job
Like, you
application.
weren't gonna show this off.
Yeah,
Like
this
you
is a
weren't gonna like, because
fundraising.
this is funny.
Yeah.
Like it's funny that he did this. That like, it's so, we live in the stupidest era of human history, Justin. I regret to say
No,
this, but we
no.
are living in truly unprecedented times of human idiocy. I know we're not supposed to use the word idiot. I know it's ableist. I'm sorry. I was informed of this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, no, it's
But,
true. It's hard.
Like
a tough one.
they just the assumption out there that even producing a map like that would actually do anything,
Yeah.
that like would get them like you, are you that dumb and pathetic, Paul
No,
Mason? that,
they're
like
not,
you
but
think that this works?
I've always my thing now is always that it's not about how dumb they are. It's about how dumb they think we are. You know, like I think most of the people saying this is about dismantling the Jewish. Nobody who tweeted this is about dismantling the Jewish community thinks this is dismantling the Jewish community. They also, first of all, wouldn't be tweeting about it. They would actually, it's actually not that hard to figure out who it is, and they would be, whatever. The point is, this is not the response of people who actually fear that the Jewish community is going to be dismantled. This is the response of people who are trying to appeal to people they think are idiots. They're trying to appeal to people that they have contempt for. They're trying to appeal to people who can't tell the difference between a Zionist and their scare quotes they put around, and the Jewish community, which is like. It's just a bunch of people.
A very cynical thing. Like it's the idea that you can simply just say stuff like the Jewish community,
Yeah.
and invoke that as a kind of neutral base of supporters of Zionism is so palpably false.
Yeah.
And it's such in denial of the history of Zionism.
Yeah.
And I've had a ton of anti-Zionist Jews on my show sort of talking about this and sort of like trying to talk about how it's important to decouple the active political project of Zionism and the much older thousands-year-old tradition of Judaism, and like the different peoples across the world who have identified as Jews. And like those two histories are very, very different.
Yeah.
And the idea that you can just simply conflate them because, here is a map with that includes Jewish synagogues.
I don't
It's like,
even know about
that's-
synagogues. I don't even know.
It wasn't
if there's
even.
a
It probably
synagogue out
wasn't.
there. Yeah, but I mean, I know there's like.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
None of
whatever.
it matters. I mean, they can also say anything. Like they
Yeah,
can say
exactly.
anything, and it doesn't matter. Like you can, and that's also the weird thing is that we can really say anything, and it doesn't really matter in the sense that like they have the hard power, they have the imperialist support, they have.
Yeah.
Like they have the F-16s. Like we just have the truth on our side, which we'd like to think that that's like righteous and correct, but like ultimately in our society, like what does the truth matter? Like the truth is Canada murdered the indigenous people and stole their land and made themselves a country on it. Like does that change? Like if I say that out loud, does that change anything? Like does that alter the reality? No,
Maybe
but
it does. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, there is a
They
thing about
freak
bearing
out about
witness
it.
and like
Yeah.
saying things, but.
No, but I
I
guess it
also
has
think,
more to
like-
do with how they constitute their power, right? Like how they make a Zionist community, how they make Zionist Zionist communities of interest, Zionist ideological communities out of North American powerful institutions. Like how do they do that? Well, they do that by implying that this is a righteous cause, by implying, like you said, that it's not a colonial project. It's a project of people taking refuge from persecution in Europe, right? And so I guess it does make it difficult if you can't believe in it. If it turns out that it's this rotten, sordid, group of people attacking a lady's funeral after assassinating her, and like attacking pallbearers on video, and like going and attacking a mosque, and like zip tying people who are at prayer and laying them face down and taking trophy photos. Like, that's not something a person who likes to see themselves as having a conscience wants to support. So I guess there is some kind of importance to these facts.
I'd like to think that. I don't know. I don't know if facts matter. Like facts
Yeah,
don't
I don't
care
think
about
they.
hard power. Hard power doesn't care about facts.
Yeah,
Like it's just it doesn't. Like the fact is, Zionism is this racist colonial project, and
yeah,
it doesn't change, and that if anything aids its adoption as like one of the premier allies of our governments, because
yeah. I mean, this is
they
a
they
great.
share they share they share a shared project. Like there's a project that's safe, that in both of those they have an ideological
Yeah,
overlap in terms of what they are, which is taking land, which is, I mean, at the root of what Canada is, what the
yeah,
US is also what Zionism is that taking land away from people and installing themselves and building their own way of life, and
yeah,
excluding those people that they displaced, and trying to, the scientists put it, like, oh, the old will die and the young will forget,
yeah.
right? Like
But
that's,
see, that's still a thing. They want people to forget. They want people to forget those facts, right?
yeah,
So again, like we should come back to this, because this, I think, is an endless debate, especially for people like us who all we do is this. Um,
endless debate.
but like let's come back to it, because I also don't think they would have put so much effort into lying, into this whole infrastructure of lying and deception, if facts didn't matter at all. But yeah, any concluding thoughts on the mapping? Go look at the map, people, for God's sakes.
Go look at the map. It's very interesting.
Mapliberation.org.
I'm gonna link to it. I'm gonna link to like the interesting blog post that M. Cohen did.
Yeah.
And yeah, just, I mean, it doesn't, like, it's the same thing I felt about like all those normie, human rights organizations calling Israel an apartheid state. I was like, yeah, 70 years too late, buddy. Like what are you gonna do? Is that gonna change anything? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that there is an echo chamber of what we do, because
Yeah.
we're in the world of intellectuals and writers and discourse makers. And so the idea that the Amnesty International will come out some landmark report and it's going to change everything is like, that's because we'd like to think that like human rights organizations actually matter.
Yeah.
Whereas in reality they don't. And most of the time they serve the interest of the imperialists.
Yeah.
And like most of like the nastiest regime changers work for Amnesty International or Human Rights Watch. And in fact, cynically, I would say that a lot of people use Palestine to shoehorn other more insidious politics. So, right? So like,
yeah, I've
is-
actually seen a lot of pro like Assad must go people supporting the mapping project. I'm not gonna say who or anything like that, but I have seen that.
I mean, there's another story here about the widespread the division in the Palestine solidarity movement that sort of comes up over Syria, but that's a different episode.
Yeah.
And that's
And
an
we have
episode for Palestinians, I think, to lead, not us.
And we have a non-violence episode to do, our annual follow-up.
Yes. When we yell about nonviolence. I'm excited.
All right.